Good morning and welcome to Rosebud Homestead. Today we're going to do something that I think is pretty exciting. A few days ago on my vlog, I announced that my sister Cindy, who appeared in a video a little while ago on how to plan for a year's supply of food storage, she and I have announced that we are going to be collaborating on a book using her plan and both of our recipes. And so it has gotten me to think a lot about the situation that we're going to frame in that book. And we have decided that we are going to do a worst case scenario with grid down, no electricity, no refrigeration. And that may or may not be the actual situation. But if we prepare for a worst case scenario, then we will be able to deal with whatever it actually happens to be. And so today's video, we're going to focus on grid down, baking bread. How do we do that? And so this video in particular is about emergency preparedness and food security. Also self-reliance, because there will be some skills that we will need to develop if we don't already have those prior to, in our family we call it, if the bomb hits. That phrase came out of the Cold War from my dad, so I prefer if the bomb hits. So we're going to get started on exactly what we'll need in just a moment. We are going to be using my basic bread recipe in our book. We're going to put this recipe, we'll also put Cindy's recipe. They're two quite different, so you'll have a choice between the two and use either one or both at any given time. We have done a video on this recipe already. It is very detailed and I talk a lot about the nuances of making bread. Today I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go through it fairly quickly, putting it together. I would recommend, if you have not seen that video, that you watch it, because there is a lot of nuance to making bread. I have been so gratified to see how many of you are either returning to baking bread or you are doing it for the very first time and having success with this recipe. That just thrills me. I just think it is so wonderful. You know, if the grid actually does go down ever, bread is going to be one of the staples that we're going to have to know how to do. And if you have special dietary needs, then you need to work on recipes that will work for you and have the ingredients all prepared and stored so that you don't have to worry about that aspect of it, that you can just make your bread on a weekly basis or however often you do, knowing that you have enough of the individual ingredients stored so that you'll be able to do that. Now, this recipe makes two large loaves, 5.5 by 9.5, and we'll get to that part later. But how do we do it off grid? My oven is off limits. And so in just a few minutes, I'm going to take you outside and show you two different ways. What I'm going to need is something that is quick and easy with a place to bake it that is as reliable as possible. So that's what we're going for. So if the grid is down, I don't have any of these modern conveniences. I have to do everything by hand. So I would have heated my water on my off-grid cook stove or camp stove or something. This is 2.5 cups of water. And it is important that the water not be over 100 degrees. And I explained that in the other video. So this has been sitting out. I want to just test it. It is 87, 88 degrees. That is the perfect temperature, so we can proceed. So the recipe is also at the bottom of that other video. So I start with 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The humidity in a kitchen can be different. I assume that I'll still have my kitchen. I just won't have electricity, refrigeration, and any of that. So I'm starting with 5. And then this is how easy this is. I explain why I don't wet my yeast. I'm just going to put it in dry. That's 2 tablespoons of yeast, 3 tablespoons of sugar, And as I explained in the other video, I like to get my hands, which are very clean, in the dough and in the bread because I just need to feel it. That's one of my nuances. Okay, so those things are mixed together. Now I'm just going to sprinkle on the top 1.5 teaspoons of salt. And I'm just barely going to mix it out on the top like this. And then I'm going to dump the water, 2.5 cups of water in all at one time. And then this is 3 tablespoons of oil that I'm also going to put in at the same time as the water. Then I'm going to start with a wooden spoon. Get these things out of the way here. Mixing it up. I never know from one day to the next when I'm making this bread how much is going to be absorbed, how much flour is going to be absorbed by the water. Some days more is absorbed than other days. This is an old bowl. I bet I've had this for 40 years. It's perfect for making bread by hand. So bread baking is a skill that we're all going to need to have. Otherwise, we'll need to use some barter to trade something that we have to someone who does make bread, but we might as well learn it ourselves. Okay, I'm just going to put a little more on the top here, and I'm just going to start kneading this in. Mixing. Okay, I'm going to knead. I can already tell it's quite wet, so I am going to put a lot out here. Now, this is not the kneading part, this is the mixing part. So I'm mixing the ingredients. One of the things that I do is I do what I call a caterpillar. Just make those segments of a caterpillar to help mix. And then I'm just folding, almost like kneading. We want this dough to be, as I say in my original video, Jim came up with this, soft like a marshmallow. Okay, we'll come back when I've kneaded this for about 5 minutes. Okay, I have kneaded this for about 5 minutes. It is not ready. So I am going to let it just sit there, covered. And I learned this trick when I learned how to do artisan bread. It will still be developing the gluten right there. You do not need to knead it the whole entire time. Now, I do have some flour left over. It's a little bit more than a cup. Sometimes I've even used as much as 7 cups. The original recipe calls for 6.5. I thought it might be kind of fun for you to know how much I have stored out in our food storage to be able to make 1 batch of bread per week for the 2 of us. So that would give us 2 loaves of bread every single week. Now, if I do that, then this is what I have to store. 130 pounds of this flour, 3 pounds of yeast, 5 pounds of sugar, 2 pounds of salt, 3 quarts of oil, and 9 gallons of water. So it's very important that we have a good water storage or a good source of water as well. All right, so we're going to let this sit for about 5 minutes, develop some more gluten. We'll come back and knead it a little bit more, and then we'll go to the next step. All right, so this has been sitting for about 5 minutes. It's all relaxed, and I can tell that the gluten is developing there. So I'm just going to knead it for another couple of minutes here, a few more times, and then we're going to be ready for the next step. I'm ready now to put this in the bowl for rising. The top is smooth and the bottom is pinched together. Now I have cleaned this bowl and it has probably a tablespoon of oil in the bottom. I'm going to just grab this dough and put it top down and move it around so that the whole thing is oiled. And then I'm going to flip it over so the oiled part is on the top. Now we're going to cover it with a grocery bag. We want it to be airtight, checking for holes, no holes. And we're now going to allow this to do its first rise. So another thing in recipes, sometimes they say allow to rise for an hour or an hour and a half or until double. And so always, always, always let your dough tell you how long it needs to rise. Don't go by any time specification in a recipe. Those are guidelines, and so once it is nice and swollen, and it is about double, however long that takes. This particular recipe, the range for me has been about 30 minutes when my yeast is brand new, until about an hour and a half. And so I'll come back and check this periodically just to see, and then after that we will shape it into the loaves. I knew that I was going to need different type of a setup in order to be able to bake bread. And so I talked to friends and some of our relatives and did a lot of research and found this Camp Chef outdoor camp oven. And it is just as slick as it can be. We went ahead and got it. It was $199. It has a little oven, removable racks, and so I can really fit 2 bread pans right here of my smaller size, but my large one goes like this crosswise. And it does a great job. It gets up to 350, not much higher than that, which is just fine for baking bread. And then the top has a couple of burners on it. And so it does double duty. So this will be really nice. Now, in thinking about off-grid cooking, because this is propane powered, that means we're going to have to store propane. Our property runs on propane, and so we have a big propane tank. And then we also have several small ones that we use as well. So for us, that is not a problem. And so this will be a really good alternative to running my electric range in the kitchen. I already, with my canning setup, I can cook on propane on my canning setup. So this gives me 2 places where I can have pots of boiling or cooking food. Now we're going to step out a little bit further and I'm going to show you something else. This is my All-American Sun oven. We've had this for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, and I've used it for a few things in that time frame, but I figured I'd better start learning how to bake bread in it. And so I did a test run a couple of weeks ago. It worked great. So the Sun oven, you aim it directly to the sun. There is a little hole right here. You need to be sure, I stand back here and make sure that the sun is centered over a little eye there for maximum angle the sun's heating. And then the thermometer is right here, and I've had this out here preheating for probably an hour or so, and I won't need it for a couple of hours, and it is right now at 325. And you can cook with this Sun oven, whether or not the sun is bright in the sky like it is today, even if it's cloudy, even in the middle of winter time, so long as there is enough light. And you don't need 350 to bake bread. You can bake bread at 225. It just takes longer. And one of the issues here that we'll find out is that the bread comes out pretty pale looking. And so I learned a trick by doing more research. We will spray the top with a little bit of, mist it with water, and that should make a difference in the browning. So when those loaves are ready to go in the oven, we're going to put one in here and one in the propane. So we will come back when we're ready to shape those loaves. Well, okay, I got distracted. It's been maybe 45 minutes, and look at our bread. Whoa, is it ever ready? All the way up to the top. Fortunately, I oiled that top so that bag came off easier. All right, so now, even though it is a little bit overproofed, it is, at this point in time, that makes no difference whatsoever. So we're going to shape that bread. This time I'm going to set my buzzer, and we will be back when these are ready to go into our 2 ovens. See you then. All right, the propane oven is preheating, and the Sun oven is ready to go. So here's the loaf for the Sun oven. I'm just going to lightly mist it with water, and so then we're going to walk out and put that right in the Sun oven. So I'm just going to lift the lid. It's about 330, 340 degrees in there, and place it right on that little leveling rack. Close this. and lock it down. All right, there we have it. And I'll come out about every 15 minutes and check this. We don't want it to get overdone. So next is to get the loaf in the propane oven. Temperature indicator is straight up and down. It's up to 350. So I'm just going to slip this loaf of bread right in. Plenty hot in there. Better not rise much more than about an inch. That's all the room we have there. So we'll come back when both of these are ready to take out of the oven, and it probably won't be at the same time. The bread in the propane oven came out about 20 minutes ago. We'll go check on it in just a minute. This has only gotten up to 325, but that's still enough. You can see all of the condensation on the inside. So we're just going to go ahead and open it up and test it. It still didn't brown wonderfully. It's very much done. It's at 200, and that means it is done. So I'm going to lift in here and get this out. And we will go in the kitchen, and I'll see you there. It really smells good. So I'm just going to turn it out. We'll see how it looks. Well, it's pale. But you know what? That's okay. I might leave it in even longer next time, but the interior is done. It's up to 200. So you can compare the two. Now, whenever I have cooked off grid, it has not been as perfect as I can do in my own kitchen. Obviously, I have a lot more experience in my own kitchen, but this is certainly going to do. Now, here's something that I observed. The propane oven has hot spots. You see the bread is browner here on this side than it is on this side. So next time I'll pull it, this side right here was toward the back corner of the oven, and so next time I will pull it closer to the door instead of to the back, and maybe it will be more even. Also on this one next time, this is only the second time that I have cooked bread in the Sun oven. And the first loaf turned out just fine. It is a little bit pale. I may try to spray more water on the top to get a little bit more browning, but it's not bad. And so this bread would last Jim and me if we are in conditions where the grid was down and we were having to survive on what we had in our storage room. This bread would be more than adequate for us. And so because we would not have a freezer, I would be baking bread every week. This will keep a week without going moldy or anything else. This is really an excellent recipe because it is so versatile. I made it with 100% white flour this time, but I have also made this recipe, and we have a video on half and half. You can add things to it, like if you have leftover oatmeal from the morning, you can throw it in this bread. You can make multi-grain if you have several different types of flour that you would like to do. And so it is a very versatile and very forgiving recipe. So this is our experience in the grid down and baking bread on what we have available. It's always a good idea to practice off-grid everything so that when we actually have to, if we have to, face a situation like that, it won't be all brand new. We will already be skilled in using the equipment that we have invested in to help keep us alive during difficult times. So we want to go ahead and cut into these so that we can take a look at the crumb. And they are still a little bit hot, but I'm going to cut them anyway. So this is the one I'm more worried about. We'll see. Well, it's done. Done in the middle. The crumb looks just fine. It just is very white. Some children really like crustless bread. This almost is crustless bread. Now this one, it's been out for a longer time, so I'll check this end of it. No question about this one being done. All the way around, it is done. So there we have our off-grid bread baking experience for today. Thank you, and we'll be doing more grid down videos and hope these will be useful for you. So thank you for being with us this time, and we'll see you at our next video.